Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good afternoon. To begin with, our topic is the sound of learning, how music shapes education and builds lifelong skills. Music is more than just a creative outlet. It's a tool that enhances cognitive, emotional, and social development while fostering collaboration, creativity, and lifelong for the arts. Joining us today is Mr. Sherwin Jeremy Atkins, a passionate music educator with over 8 years of experience transforming the way young minds engage with music. From his humble beginnings as a music instructor, he rose to become head of performing arts, shaping vibrant music programs that inspire creativity and discipline. Throughout his career, has introduced students to diverse instruments, organized captivating musicals and talent showcases, and provided life skills education through group lessons in guitar, keyboard, and vocal training. As a UAE topper in communication, he brings unmatched interpersonal skills, fostering confidence and growth in students, both as individuals and musicians. Please join a true advocate for the transformative power of music, Mr. Sherwin Jeremy Atkins. Welcome, Mr. Sherwin, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on the show today, Famida. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation on how music not just shapes education but builds lifelong skills. And so I'm excited to share insights, stories, and ideas with you and your audience today.
That's great and amazing. So, to begin with, Sherwin, you've worked with students across various age groups and skill levels. From your experience, how does music influence a student's academic, emotional, and personal growth?
Well, as you mentioned earlier at the start of the show, music has the ability, it's a remarkable ability to enhance cognitive as well as emotional and social development in students. There's so much of research that shows that music improves memory and focus. For example, students who participate in music training have a higher activation in their brain areas that are linked to attention and auditory processing. Even learning an instrument strengthens solving skills as they begin to interpret symbols and plan movements and adapt in real time. There are studies that even reveal that students in education score a lot higher on standardized math and reading tests. Personally, if you ask me, music builds confidence. It offers children opportunities for self-expression, and performing in groups, in fact, foster teamwork and empathy. And these are 21st century skills that we look to harmonize and support one another. So, emotional expression through music also provides an outlet for stress, helping students to navigate. So, a shy student today who incorporates music in their daily life stands to gain confidence by performing either as a solo category in an event, in a school event, or eventually becoming more comfortable speaking in front of peers just because music is part of his or her life.
So, music is often celebrated for its emotional and creative impact, and I really with you with the fact that it builds up confidence and most importantly looking at the 21st century skills where students do make the effort of collaborating with each other and building up on their uh, team spirit basically. So if you could share some examples how music has supported learning in maybe other academic areas.
Absolutely. There's so many various examples that I could cite, and some of the simplest ones that come off the top of my head are math and language. I recall a few years ago a student of mine who struggled with understanding fractions, and He had a breakthrough with maths when he learned rhythm in music. So, to put it into perspective, we clapped out a certain time signature and then we began to divide it into halves and quarters and eighths as well as physically to demonstrate fractions as a concept. And this kinesthetic approach helped him to internalize a very abstract idea in his opinion and his view. Similarly, in language arts, I've seen groups of students who have improved vocabulary and grammar simply by songwriting, creating songs about their ecosystems or about their world that they live in. Writing lyrics required them to research and their understanding, which resulted in both their knowledge retention as well as improved linguistic skills. And there are a lot of studies that showcase how music has direct impact and a positive impact in core subjects as well.
Absolutely so true. You've taken me back to my English lessons as well. Like when we do creative writing, especially teaching them the art of writing poetry. It's so good to see when students create their own poems and then try and give it, that rhythm and music so that it is taken to a different level. So they start enjoying creative writing, basically, even language for that matter. And I'm also reminded of stage performances like not just doing drama theater, but giving what you say the unique experience of a musical, the entire concept of a stage performance being a musical, I'm sure would be a very different experience, right?
Absolutely. Getting on stage and having partaking in a live performance with countless eyes on you, it's a different ball game altogether. It's one thing to practice in the confines of a closed get the opportunity to share that with a larger audience. That builds more than just confidence, it builds character. And I think that's something that is detrimental today for the students as they move forward in life, that not only are we building skills in them, but we're building character as well.
Absolutely. Going forward with our interesting conversation today, let's talk about the classroom, Sherwin. Like, how can whether or not they are music specialists, integrate music into their teaching to enhance learning outcomes?
That's a wonderful question from Ida. I've often interacted with a lot of my colleagues to integrate music into classrooms for the sole purpose of enhancing learning. And some of the easiest ways to do that is rhythm and movement. Rhythm games are basically mathematical patterns. A lot of people, even clapping a beat is a sequence, or even having if you look at historical timelines, for example, clapping to a steady beat while reciting multiplication tables, it engages multiple sensory inputs, so it aids in retention. So students could use drum patterns to represent weather cycles, such as tapping lightly on a drum for drizzle but loudly for thunderstorms, thereby learning about the entire water cycle in our ecosystem. Another quick example is background music. Background music creates a very conducive environment for learning. You see, upbeat music is energetic, and so while students work as part of group projects, it would be beneficial. Whereas soft classical music can aid with concentration during examinations. I recall a particular teacher in my current school that always has music on as into the classroom at the very start of the day. That those sounds of nature, it creates a very creative environment for them from the very get-go, and it helps students to visualize and write throughout the day with greater depth, only because that's how their day started. So there are many ways in which even teachers who aren't music specialists can integrate music into their own lessons to enhance the learning of students.
I that like amazing ideas, and when I'm like recollecting and reflecting on some of the ideas that you're sharing, I can just think about what a vibrant classroom it would be uh, if these things are incorporated. So, moving ahead, creating jingles for topics has been one of my favorite classroom hacks. It sticks in students' minds. What's a simple activity every teacher can try to incorporate into their music lessons? So, when I say jingles, I think we've been using these jingles even for classroom management and getting our children disciplined. As you just mentioned, one of the strategies, like, in the classes where she starts a lesson with some music played and it gets the children enthused about learning further. It could be jingles for classroom management, or it could be things used like for the HRT homeroom teachers, or maybe even the PE or extracurricular activity educators.
Correct.
What's your take on that?
I think you mentioned a point that I absolutely strongly agree with, and that's classroom management. Sometimes teachers are challenged with dynamic personalities among student groups, and but one practice I've seen across multiple schools in the UAE is something called the classroom anthem. At the very start of the academic year, a class teacher gets their students to write and sing a short song summarizing the classroom rules or the classroom values. And this anthem can be revisited throughout the year to reinforce expectations in a fun and memorable. Not only that, it acts as a checkpoint for benefits and incentives for students as well. And it gets them motivated to work to the next step. And I've seen that even after the academic year has passed, the songs and the sometimes in some cases raps as well stay with the children into the next academic year. Those values, they carry it forward with them. Those rules, those disciplines, they take it forward with them, and that helps them in the academic year as well. So that's one thing I really enjoy watching. A second one would be fraction clapping, something I referred to earlier, which helps students to visualize maths concepts. As a student, I wasn't always the best when it came to maths, but I saw firsthand that when I started to study and understand music, math became a lot easier. And it only happened when I was able to visualize the concepts. Mathematical concepts are introduced to students solely through vocabulary and speech. But a visual aspect helps students to understand the concept a lot better. So, for example, one clap for a whole, or two claps for halves, or four claps for quarters, etc. These techniques help teachers to move their students in the right direction when it comes to learning, progressing at a pace that is student, and it goes according to the learning curve of every individual student.
Oh, that's. I think you've taken music lessons at a different level, all of it. But Sherwin, before we get into news break, I just want to request: is it possible for you to like play a jingle or sing a jingle or come up with something after our quick break? And it would be like for our listeners.
Sure, not a
Yeah.
problem. I will try to freestyle something by the end of the lesson. By the end of the show, yeah.
Yes, yes. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be back, dear listeners, on Teachers Talk Radio with Sherwin, the sound of learning, transforming education through music.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
ParentKind are a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parental participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost students' improve behaviour and enhance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movement that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents.
Are you ready to enhance your assessments in a world where AI is transforming education? Join Toddle for an exclusive event designing a live session tailored just for UK educators. Explore practical strategies to keep your assessments both effective and fair as AI continues to reshape education. Hear from experts Darren Coxon and Dale Bassett, who'll guide you through designing authentic assessments and navigating AI's biggest challenges. It's happening on December the 2nd from 4 to 6:30 p.m. Don't miss out on this opportunity to discover how assessment strategies for the future of education. Register for free at toddleapp.com/UKAI and secure your spot now.
Hey educators, ready to kickstart 2025 with world-class inspiration? Then don't miss Bet UK, happening January 22nd to 24th in London. Get fired up in our high-energy arena hosted by Laura McInerney with an incredible lineup. Hear from racing driver and inclusion advocate Nicholas Hamilton, power duo Michael Rosen and Christian Foley. Plus, don't miss the legendary Stephen Fry discuss the human approach to AI. Explore hundreds of hours of unmissable content, the latest ed tech, and free CPD opportunities to supercharge your skills. All for free. So why wait? Head to betshow.com and book your ticket now. Let's make 2025 your best year yet.
This is Teachers Talk Radio. Is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Schools Week features a report on the disadvantaged gap in EYFS. According to new data, the gap is widening between the proportion of pupils eligible for means-tested free school meals achieving a good level of development when compared to their non-disadvantaged peers. The gap grew from 19.9% to 23 to 20.5% last year. This reversed the progress logged last year according to Department for Education data published recently, although the data set only goes back to 2021 to 22 after changes were made to EYFS. The persistence of disadvantaged gaps has become a source of consternation across the education sector. The EYFS data shows the gap is opening up even amongst the youngest. Girls continue to outperform boys, with this gap widening for the second year running, but the difference between autumn and summer-born children narrowed in the same time frame. Full analysis of the data and further information about the disadvantaged gap at post-16 A-level can be found on the Schools Week website. The BBC covers reports that Australia will ban children aged under 16 from using social media after its strictest bans. The ban, which will not take effect for at least 12 months, could see tech companies fined the equivalent of £25.7 million if they don't comply. The Australian Prime Minister says the legislation is needed to protect young people from the harms of social media, something echoed by parents' groups. Critics, however, say questions over how the ban will work and the impact it may have on privacy and have been unanswered. The Australian ban sets the highest age limit by any country and does not include exemptions for existing users or those with parental consent. The vote passed by 34 votes to 19, and full details can be found on the BBC News website. In a linked story, The Independent reports that just 18% of teachers think a phone ban would improve pupil behaviour, according to a recent poll. More than 2 in 5 teachers agree that mobile phones can be a teaching tool within schools. The survey of 1,001 UK teachers also suggested that only 20% feel unauthorised mobile phone use disrupts their classroom frequently, whilst the most disruptive behaviours were listed as student chatter, fidgeting, and disrespect to other students. The YouGov poll also asked for teachers' top measure for improving behaviour, suggesting reducing class sizes and increasing support for pupils with behavioural challenges. Further details on this aspect of the issue of mobile technology can be found on the newspaper's website. Schools Week also reports on an aspect of the recruitment issue. A report on head teacher recruitment says schools in the Northwest are the most likely to be isolated and shut out from attracting the best head teachers. The Institute found current and future head teachers tended to work only in connected communities and were unlikely to move for work outside of those areas. This creates isolated schools left without the best head teachers. The Northwest had the largest portion of isolated primary schools, whilst isolated secondary schools were concentrated in the West Midlands, east of England and the South East. London attracts more than half of the most effective heads. The North East is also revealed as disproportionately successful in developing and attracting highly effective head teachers, despite having a smaller share of the overall teacher workforce. It attracts the highest proportion of the most effective secondary heads at 23% and also trains a fifth of them. The EPI ranked head teachers on whether they improved their school's test or exam results and then checked how schools with leaders at different fared in terms of other metrics such as pupil progress, teacher retention and school attendance. A research of the EPI said the research showed government needs to encourage more localised movement across schools, and Academy Trust should consider how they grow and deploy leaders in order to spread best practice. Finally, the BBC features a report on a 49-year-old exercise book. The book, discovered in a drawer of a school desk, has been returned to its former owner after it was discovered over half-term. The front cover of the book was shared on social media, and the owner was invited back to the school to be reunited with his property. The book was labelled Roman Studies and contained detailed sketches of an amphitheatre, Roman bathing systems, and several cities. The presentation of the book was exceptional, and the teacher who discovered it felt it deserved to be returned. When the owner asked what to do with the book, he replied, "I was thinking of putting it in a drawer." This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Welcome back to the afternoon show with Famida Chaudhary on Teachers Talk Radio. If you are just tuning in, we are discussing the sound of learning, how music shapes education and builds lifelong skills with Mr. Sherwin Atkins. Before the break, we explored the powerful role of music in shaping students' cognitive, emotional, and social development. Now, before we go ahead with some practical strategies, challenges, and a long-term impact of music education, Sherwin, do we have some jingle ready from your end?
I've got a short, how should I phrase this, but maybe you could call it a rap. Go by songwriting as a technique to showcase how we can use music in the classroom. So, as we talked about earlier, a classroom anthem, harping on values such as excellence, growth and learning, respect and ambition, aspiration. I came up with a short jingle, a short rap that you can say, and this is how it goes. In our classroom, we shine so bright. We learn, we grow, we do what's right. Lead the way. Together we win every single day. We listen, we share, we always try. Reach for the stars and aim for the sky. One team, one heart, we're strong and true. In this classroom, there's a place for you.
Oh, that's amazing, Sherwin. That was like so quick, and it is absolutely going to be like an anthem that will stay long. said, that even if you do it in a particular class, it's just going to be carry forward. Sometimes the children relate to it so really well that it's going to be like a lifelong learning anthem. And I'm so glad to hear that. I literally had goosebumps when I was thinking if my children really had this anthem singing with a nice tune to it, I'm sure the class is going to be, with respect to discipline, as well as motivate them to reach for the stars. So that's really nice of you to get that going. So moving on, Sherwin, I have just seen like you have had an exposure not only as an educator, but you have also been the head of department. So when we look at a little bit of leadership in music education, performing arts, how do you approach designing innovative music programs that engage 100% participation, if I have to say, or most of the students participating and engaging all students?
A very good question, Famida. And one of the key things to consider here is strengths and weaknesses of children before crafting a curriculum or designing a curriculum, so to speak. Strengths, what kind of resources you can acquire for the upcoming year. Weaknesses, to identify what are the areas of development that students need to focus on, and thereby building a curriculum that works along these tangents. While there are many designs and music models that you can adapt and work with for a school, for example, the National Curriculum of England has a wonderful repository of lesson plans as well for teachers to utilize. However, what I found is to look at the ethos of the school, the unique selling point as to what the school would like to focus in on. I remember a few years ago, one of my previous schools, drumming was a key aspect of the school simply because a lot of the students were listening to a lot of rap music at the time. And while we wanted to steer them in a very positive direction, we as a school acquired, I think, about 20 drum sets, and we incorporated drumming as part of our school lessons, our music lessons. And over a period of a year, we developed about 50 students who were able to perform for the Dubai police for UAE national celebrations. And so it's a key component to look at where the strengths and interests as well as weaknesses lie for our students, developing based on that rather than just designing something that's generic or taking something off the internet.
That's again, amazing and a unique, innovative idea, actually, where when you look at, of course, we do look at strengths, but looking from the weakness point of view and working towards those cohort of students and designing outcomes is something. Being in UAE, Sherwin, something that I think I'm sure has been a challenge for you as a music teacher when it comes to diverse cultural and musical backgrounds of students, because being expats and students of different nationalities, I'm sure this also has been like a learning when you've been teaching music to different cultural background students.
Absolutely. Number one, as you mentioned, because of the cultural background there's an affinity that varies for every student. Students prefer music from their home countries, or in some cases, they don't prefer music from their home countries, and they like their preferences are more international to speak. But these challenges can be easily overcome by looking at what the students have at that given point. One of the key challenges I faced with diverse students of different backgrounds and demographics was during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think the COVID-19 pandemic itself limited everyone and put a constraint on everyone. And music teachers too found it extremely difficult to keep the students engaged and to have multiple demographics and multiple student learners, it was quite a challenge. One of the ways we got around that challenge and that constraint was using technology. We found, and I think everyone will agree, children and students today are far more tech savvy than we were at their age. And so we tapped into that by using free and, in some cases, very low paying applications and softwares to leverage the learning. Softwares like Newsco or Flat.io or YouTube tutorials as well, Music Lab. These sort of applications, this approach helped us to incorporate an engaging aspect into a lesson. We, even though the students were confined to the four walls of their house, we incorporated everyday objects, things like turning your household items into musical instruments. While we did get a lot of flack from parents because children had cups and spoons that were ringing all day long, it was something that was innovative. Innovative doesn't necessarily mean technology. It just means doing something different. So we found natural everyday instruments like tapping desks or creating shakers from rice bottles. I even recall one of our history teachers recreating battle sounds using stomping feet and clapping rhythm. And so I think that was one of the very key components in overcoming challenges as well.
Absolutely. I think next question actually was related to technology, but you've literally touched upon it, and also how kids could come up with creative ideas. Of course, it would be the teachers who would direct it when it comes to creating these different sounds with household objects. And I'm sure they might have created objects, musical instruments, in fact, sustainable products and whatever is available at their disposal. And this would have, the lessons would have gone to a different level of engagement, I feel, when such level of creativity would come in from music teachers for that matter. And I'm just imagining that how difficult it would have been to get, as you said, during COVID, get the students' attention to get engaged in a music lesson, whereas maybe we might not have the instruments that you had planned for. So I think for educators it could have been taking risks with their lessons, and of course putting their creativity at an extent that could be unimaginable. Also, Sherwin, something that comes to my mind, look at music lessons, this is what I have observed at times, that music lessons, children get, that fun aspect is always there. They get excited, they get into, because maybe they are going to learn a new instrument today, or they're going to be really exploring things in a lesson. But I'm looking at how do you maintain that balance between the fun aspect of music needed to master an instrument or theory?
That's a wonderful question, Famida, and it takes me back to a concept that a lot of people are familiar with, but I don't think they perceive and understand completely. When they say music is a universal language, a language in its essence is something you can read, write, speak, and comprehend as well. And when it comes to music, yes, it's fun, definitely. You can play multiple songs, you can learn various instruments, you can learn to sing and increase your vocal range, and all of that is fun. But there is a very, very fine line when it comes to learning and then mastering an instrument or mastering a musical technique. Similarly, like for example, in English, where you're recognizing and decoding letters and words, with music, it's reading notes and rhythms and the markings on a particular score. For example, reading a musical score of something as simple as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star requires interpreting symbols for pitch, rhythm, and tempo. And that's something that can only be done through repetition for pattern recognition and visual decoding to convey meaning. So while yes, it is extremely, it's a lot of fun to practice. There are days where you will feel challenged. There are days where you will feel not up to it. Fine. Everyone goes through that. We're individuals, we're humans. But the important thing to remember is that the music doesn't change. We change because we are influenced by all the circumstances that surround us every day. It can be the weather, it could be a conversation with a friend or a colleague, or a parent or a family member. It could be something that happened in school or the workplace. And we need to understand that children today are far more pressurized when it comes to academics as it was as so when it comes to creating that balance, I think it's ensuring that music is seen at par with other subjects. Often it is sidelined as a secondary subject, but I think when people realize the impact it has academically as well as socially and emotionally, I think that could make it one of the front runners of being a core subject.
Absolutely. You really brought in an important point of that impact is I think that is something every parent would want to see in their child, and even if it is not academically, I mean to say core subjects and academics is important, but when you look at the extracurricular or non-academic subjects nowadays, I have seen the passion parents have subjects is increasingly there, because I think they also understand the fact that there are these undermining things that the children will learn, in bargain of doing learning, or getting also attending a music lesson for that matter. So coming to my next question, when I say about impact of music education, Shavin, what do you see as the long-term impact of music education as they transition into adulthood? Now I'm looking at our senior students or middle school students who've been for a while learning music.
That's a very intricate question, Famida, and I think if I were to put a pin in it to narrow down on two or three aspects of the impact music has, I'd say this. A lot of people throw around the term 21st century skills. Music is an every century skill for me. And I say this for three reasons that I touch upon. As we educate our students, as we mold our students, as we teach and shape them, we are preparing them for a world where they need to exist as well as coexist uh, in an environment that can be very cutthroat. And person may be teaching music, or while a teacher may be teaching math or physical education, we have to see that we're building character, and that's what I touched upon earlier. And so, one of the impacts I think are most important is creativity. Improvisation in music, it teaches students to think on their feet. And if we look at this ability to improvise, it's a skill that's applicable in entrepreneurship and problem solving. And I don't think there's anyone who could disagree with the fact that this skill is something everyone needs as they move forward in life. The second thing is collaboration. A lot of people don't realize it, but group work in schools and group performances in music, it mimics the dynamics of a workplace. It requires communications, it requires shared goals, it requires group effort to work together to end goal. And that's something that's required in the workplace as well. So, are we shaping our children with creativity and improvisation, with the ability to think on their feet, with the ability to work well with others? And probably the most important one for me is resilience. As I mentioned, it's a cutthroat world out there, and things are just becoming a lot more difficult and tougher for get through. And so, regular practice, overcoming fears, it builds perseverance and confidence. So, you take, for example, a student leader in a school band who wouldn't be the first choice you have to speak in front of a group of people or an audience of 100 people. This boy or this girl develops public speaking skills and they become a natural presenter in a professional setting later. So I think when it comes to preparing especially secondary students and senior students who have been working with music for a while, these three things are key to developing them as individuals for the next phase of their life: creativity, collaboration, and resilience.
I just am so amazed by your response because I think you've given out a message not only to educators but to parents as well, as how important music education, any setup for that matter, even if it's not in a school, but in general, how music can actually change their entire personality. I also remember, like, where you started off with the basics of building confidence in the students, right? So, that is also a skill that will come and will be seen over time. And music lessons, how are a contributor to it, is something that you've clearly explained to us. Moving like ahead with our conversation, Shavin, what's your vision for the future of music education in schools?
That's a wonderful question. It's something that changes over time. I think with each year that goes by, my vision for music changes. It evolves rather with not just the time, but with the requirements students as well as what's available to me as an educator. And I think one of the key things I'd like parents as well as schools to focus on is to allow children to express themselves. Uh, the reason I feel so is not to take anything away from other core subjects like English, maths, and science, but those are subjects where there are concepts that are conveyed and taught left for exploration, but within the finite rules in which it exists. Music, on the other hand, allows free expression. While there are rules in music, they don't necessarily have to be rigid and inflexible. They can be moved around for students to express themselves, to think about how they feel about it, and generally be able to articulate their thoughts and feelings. And one of the that's very important for parents as well as schools to allow students that outlet is because of the environment students are in today. With each passing year, students have high expectations of them to perform academically. And so we need to provide students an outlet for them to let loose, so to speak, but also to be themselves. And I think music, whether it's through learning an instrument, singing, I think it's important for parents to hone these skills and train these skills within their children. I think also one other aspect is for schools to come up with budget friendly resources that can enhance their music program. There's so many platforms that are free, so many platforms that are very low cost, and they have huge potential to not just shape students, but shape a school ethos. For example, just take an arbitrary example, a hypothetical example. If a school that really adopted Google Chrome Music Lab, you would find over a period of a few months multiple songs coming out of various classes and students. And what that sets is a precedent for creativity. And as that moves forward across the years, you will find that that school would likely be one of the front runners in its development and growth. The two things that schools as well as parents should focus on is developing the skills and finding budget friendly resources to improve and enhance their own music programs within their schools.
That's an excellent idea, I must say, Sherwin, which you have, shared with us. I'm sure people who are listening to us, especially head of departments or schools, they should think on these so that there's no hindrance basically in learning music. But last but not the least, Sherwin, I would want you to throw some light on something related to inclusivity and accessibility. How can music programs be adapted to include students with special needs?
That's a wonderful question for me. Then it's something I pride myself on because I've seen it happen quite a lot over the last few years. Uh, there are students who are challenged in different ways. They're different, and that's one of the reasons music is likely one of the best tools to aid them. For example, a student who struggles with communication, music can be a language that allows him or her to express themselves without having to speak. The activities can be tailored to accommodate the various learning needs and the abilities so that every student, regardless of background or their challenge, can participate. Also, I've seen that in classroom settings where there are students who are differently challenged, introducing music for them promotes empathy and understanding for other students, and it builds confidence and self esteem in those students who are struggling. So, when it comes to introducing students to music from different cultures and traditions, it broadens and fosters an understanding of diversity and inclusivity because of another individual who they have who may be struggling in a different way. So it fosters a sense of belonging together as well. It creates a very inclusive program because it becomes accessible to all students, including those with physical as well as cognitive or emotional struggles. And it ensures that no one is left out.
Left behind, yeah.
And I think what it develops relationships above all, students who struggle in these aspects, including them in collaborative music projects, it strengthens their friendships with their peers. It builds a sense of community, including them, encouraging them to support one another, to work towards a common goal, so to speak. So there are various teaching methods, visual aids, tactile instruments, digital tools that teachers and educators can use for students with different learning styles and needs. But I think it's instrumental to the education landscape for the next foreseeable future.
Thank you so much, Sherwin, for so many strategies and live practical examples, basically, for our show today. And I do see this comes only through the passion and the love that you have for music education. Your insights like transformative because I've also started thinking like how interestingly and creatively I can use music in my English lessons. So we've learned how music can inspire creativity, build essential life skills, and create a joyful learning environment for students. Whether you're a music educator or a teacher looking to bring more creativity into your classroom, I hope you found as inspiring as I did. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in and being a part of this journey. If you have more questions or feedback, don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you. Thanks a ton, Sherwin. It was amazing talking to you, and this conversation has literally taken leaps and bounds when it comes to practical implementation lessons.
Thank you so much for having me, Famida. It's wonderful. I'm so grateful to you for the opportunity to connect, to share, to engage with you. And I hope the audience had a good time listening to this as well.
I'm sure they will, and I'm sure they have such essential key takeaways that they can implement in their classrooms as well. And that's the sole purpose of Teachers Talk Radio, to spread wide and far and make education and creative and innovative. Thank you, audience. I mean to say our listeners to be here with us. Signing off, this Mrs. Famida Chaudhary from Teachers Talk Radio.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time. on Teachers Talk Radio.